Welcome back everyone to another intriguing exploration into the depths of history and human origins. Now today we take a look into a topic that challenges conventional narratives and pushes the boundaries of our understanding, the remarkable discovery linking Native American ancestry to a cave in China. But before we unravel this fascinating revelation, let's cast our minds back to a previous discussion where we tried to question the truths we've been taught. Now in that thought-provoking video, a bold assertion was made by a man challenging the very foundations of American education, suggesting that Native Americans weren't the original inhabitants of this land, but rather they inherited it from Black people. So I will be sharing the video right after my introduction, then we'll have the videos of the new discovery follow afterwards. It seems like this guy was telling the truth after all. Now, armed with this provocative notion, we venture forth to examine the latest revelation. Could the first Americans have actually been of Chinese descent? So join me as we navigate through the corridors of history and genetics, piecing together clues that may reshape our understanding of human migration and settlement. With that said, let's dive in.
A lie. Everything we've been taught in the American education system is all a lie. Yes, Native Americans weren't the original people of this land. We actually took it from Black people. We were so good at it that we just out any trace of their language and their culture.
Native Americans originally descended from a cave in Yunnan, China. Does that mean that the first Americans were Chinese? Let's talk about it. Breakthrough this week.
Current Biology magazine released a scientific study that links the DNA of modern-day Native Americans to a group of people who used to live in the caves of Yunnan, China. The Red Deer Caves. Here is a photo depiction of what they looked like.
Huh? All right, so what is new about this information that is on top of the fact that, Native Americans crossed the Bering Strait?
Well, basically, it just says that there's a third group of people, not just Siberians, not just Central Asians, but people from essentially modern-day Southeast Asia, because, the Red Deer Caves, it borders Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam. They're the ones that became Native Americans.
Man, let's talk about this, David. I think there's a lot of identity questions that come into play, but also it's just kind of like funny information. So what are like the main reactions that people had on the internet, like the different groups?
Okay, we had to go first to the Native American subreddit. Right. Basically, they were like kind of rolling their eyes like, oh, great. They're just another thing to sort of like take us away from who we are because, when they came and like or took our land, they were kind of like saying, oh, well, you guys never really belonged here anyway.
Right. And then now people are like joking about like, oh, what are they going to like call us Chinese now?
Right. Or guess what? The Chinese are going to claim us. I don't want to be Chinese. I'm Native American. And by the way, I don't think this study invalidates their identity. I totally think they should feel free and they rightfully should identify as Native American.
What are like some European, like British responses?
Some people are like, I think this is like quite normal knowledge to me. I think we've known this for like 100 years. If you look at a Chinese and you look at a Native American, they look quite similar.
And I think it's pretty funny because British people, they're more familiar with like Europeans migrating to different places than even Americans are.
Yeah.
Because Americans are always like centered around like, oh, America's like the center of the world. But then British are like, well, you guys came from us. Don't forget.
Yeah, but then Americans, and obviously I'm sure there's a range of responses, but one was like, hey man, I don't give a game straight from Beijing 10 years ago. We came over here, we won, this is our land.
Meanies, man. What about like kind of maybe Chinese people or maybe particularly people from Yunnan? They might be feeling like kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, hey, we got roots to the Native Americans to North America. What's up?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Chinese people probably in the scientific community are just glad they made a big discovery, but people in Yunnan, like you said, they're really excited to see this link, and I can see why, because Andrew, a lot of the people who live in the mountains of Yunnan right now that are sort of these like tribal mountain people, they still have native customs and a lot of things that visually are similar to the Native Americans.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you count like Taiwan, and then like you're talking about indigenous cultures from around the world, especially when it comes to kind of like people who are linked to Asia. A lot of the culture is still kind of similar.
Yeah.
At least the old traditional like clothing that they wear.
And it's really weird. It goes along like latitude. So for example, if you look at ancient Siberians and then you look at Alaskans, it's really similar. And then you go one notch level lower and maybe like First Nations and Central Asians, you know what I mean? There's more of a linkage, and then you kind of just go all the way down, because obviously if the migration pattern went all the way down through Mexico, all the way down into Peru, into South America, that's like all one like link of like 1 or 3 groups of people.
Right. So I mean, I guess, you know, should this affect how people feel? Because we're talking about 14,000 years ago, human migration, generations upon generations. People probably didn't know why they were migrating, or I don't know if they knew where they were going, because they went through Siberia, which was super cold, and then they could have just stopped and set up shop in California, which would have been great too. But they kept going all the way down.
Everybody just wouldn't want to stop in Santa Barbara or San Diego.
Yeah. But like, what does this stuff matter, or who does it matter to?
Okay, in a modern day geopolitical sense, it doesn't matter, because most people in America don't even study history. They look at life between like 50 to 100 years max.
Right.
So as far as like America goes, it doesn't matter. And not only that, like we said, unfortunately, you know, the Native Americans, I guess like they were on the losing end of the battle with the Europeans for America by a long shot. So I guess even if they did descend, like we said, you know, back to that, like I don't care if they came from Indonesia, Borneo, y'all don't know nothing. We came and we won the game.
Damn.
That's messed up, right? But that's how like sort of some people see it. And
hey, Native Americans. Hey, Native Americans. Oh, yeah. I see why you want us to be quiet. So, Chinese scientists find the DNA link to Native Americans instead of... y'all, I see why you want us to be quiet. But we got you. We got you. We've done the work for you. Show you not indigenous to North America.
Definitely not picking on this commenter, because there have been a lot of comments like this on that video, but this is the one that came across my box when I was ready to respond. So, ancestry and DNA do not determine race. Race is a social construct that depends on more than genetics and phenotype. It has to do with culture and history and so on. So even if it is true that Native Americans came from Asia at some point, however many tens of thousands of years ago or longer, that doesn't make them Asian. And what I also find interesting is a lot of people in the comment section are saying, well, race is a social construct and it doesn't matter because we're all connected and all humans are the same. And what I find interesting about that is that people are willing to say that race doesn't matter where it comes to a group of people facing cultural erasure and ongoing genocide, knowing full well that race does matter and that we don't treat each other as connected and the same. It'd be nice if we did. If we did, we would be respecting the sovereignty of Native Americans, but we don't. So even if I take race out of it, the bottom line is that we need to respect the cultural identities of people. And this is like, and it's really important where that message is like coming from an East Asian, because what we're seeing in America is that the East Asian narrative of Asian American culture on the whole is dominant, and that's leading to the erasure of South Asians and Southeast Asians. So yeah, like, the bottom line is we need to respect the cultural identities that people have, and especially where it comes to a group of people who are facing cultural erasure and ongoing.
Before I show y'all what I'm going to show y'all today, just look at what's on the screen and read it. Also, there's this. So we know for sure that their ancestors are from Asia. No matter what part of Asia, they are from Asia. Supposedly, these people crossed the Bering Strait and arrived in America, specifically the Yukon Territory, around 18,000 to 30,000 years ago. According to the Science Times, an almost 1,000-meter ancient ice wall blocked Bering Land Bridge, pushing first human migrations from Asia to America via boat. And this is from March 23rd, 2022. Previous geological studies point out that the ancient between eastern and western continents, also known as Beringia land bridge, was the path humans took when they first traveled from Asia to America. In a new study, data were found to contrast what we first thought, as the land bridge was blocked with a towering ice chunk that scales to almost 1,000 meters in height. According to the study, the ice-free corridor that was first thought to have served as a walkway for Asia-America migrants was not open until 13,800 years ago. Now we know anything around this time frame could not have been the Siberians or Native Americans as we call them today. According to the Out of Africa theory, there should be nothing man-made outside of Africa before, let's just say, 130,000 or 150,000 years ago. Alright, we on this website now. It's the Bureau of Land Management. The Calico Early Man site is located about 15 miles northeast of Barstow, California, off Interstate 15. The history of this site dates back to 1942, when amateur archaeologists discovered what they believed to be primitive stone tools in this area. The alluvial fan deposits in this area are uniquely deep stratum layers that may represent the oldest evidence of human occupation in the Americas. In 1980, doctors James Bischoff, Richard Koo, and Roy Shellman estimated that the soils at this site may date back to over 200,000 years.
Now, with videos like this, I just go straight into my research because we have to know the truth. So here are my findings. According to a new study, researchers have identified the remains of a person closely related to the ancestors of Native Americans in a cave in southern China. Now, this professor and lead author of the study published in the international peer-reviewed journal Current Biology and said it was the first sequencing of Asian DNA from East Asia, dating to when modern humans migrated to America about 14,000 years ago. So him and his colleagues collected genetic samples from a skull found in the Red Deer Cave in Mengzi City. Pardon me if I'm mispronouncing that word. Yeah, Mengzi City near the border with Vietnam in 1989. Now, the skull belonged to a woman dubbed Mengzi Rain, who actually had a deep relationship with the early people who first arrived in the Americas. He said in an interview with Chinese state television. Now, genetic surveys of modern populations suggest present-day Native Americans are likely to have come from East Asia, but direct evidence supporting the theory remains scarce. So Chinese anthropologists found the skull and related remains amid a large pile of animal fossils, including deer, monkeys, bears, and boars at the Red Deer Cave site. It was then left on a shelf for decades because no one suspected the remains belonged to a human. So the skull has some unique features that are somewhat different from what the late Homo sapiens were thought at the time. And a co-author of the study said in the same interview, most Asian DNA samples have been severely damaged. So the team spent 3 years collecting material from more than 100 points on the skull to have enough for genetic sequencing. They compared Mengzi Rain's genome to Asian DNA collected around the world and found she has strongest links to current Asian people and indigenous Americans. Now, previous studies found that Homo sapiens arrived in Southeast Asia from Africa about 60,000 years ago and then moved north to the rest of China, replacing local early human communities. The professor's team said their findings suggest a lineage of the migrants had moved along the coastline of eastern China and eventually arrived in North America by crossing the Bering Strait, which separates Arctica and Alaska. This work is very exciting as it shows how the settlement of East Asia is linked to the people of America. Now, one of the researchers with the Institute of Evolutionary Biology in Spain told new scientists, but there could be another possibility, she added, that some members of the founding population in the Americas had spread westwards back into East Asia. So this is like the new discovery, guys. But as we embark on this journey of discovery, the latest revelation linking Native American ancestry to a cave in China prompts us to reconsider long-held beliefs about the origins of the first Americans. Now, this revelation challenges the traditional narrative that Native Americans descended solely from Siberian migrants who crossed the Bering Land Bridge thousands of years ago. Instead, it raises the intriguing possibility that there may have been multiple waves of migration, with ancestors of some Native American populations originating from East Asia, including regions such as Yunnan province in China. But what implications does this have for the broader discourse on indigenous history and the colonization of the Americas? Now, here we're reminded of the bold assertion made in a previous video where it was suggested that Native Americans weren't the original inhabitants of the land, but rather inherited it from Black people. While this idea may initially seem contentious, the discovery of genetic links between Native Americans and East Asian populations adds a new layer to the discussion. Could it be that the first Americans were indeed of Chinese descent, as this recent finding seems to suggest? And if so, what does this mean for our understanding of indigenous identity and history? Now, the notion that multiple groups may have contributed to the peopling of the Americas invites us to consider a more nuanced and complex narrative of human migration and settlement. Moreover, it raises questions about the validity of historical narratives that have been shaped by colonial perspectives and Eurocentric biases. Perhaps the assertion made in the previous video that Native Americans weren't the original inhabitants of the land holds more weight than we initially thought. Could it be that indigenous peoples have been marginalized and their histories misrepresented by dominant narratives that seek to justify colonization and dispossession? Now, as we reflect on these questions, it's essential to approach the topic with humility and an open mind. While the discovery of genetic links between Native Americans and East Asian populations offers tantalizing clues, it's just one piece of the puzzle. Now, as we draw our exploration to a close, we're left with more questions than answers. That's how I feel. I mean, as is often the case when we're looking into the intricacies of history and human origins, right? The revelation of genetic links between Native American ancestry and a cave in China challenges us to rethink conventional narratives and consider the possibility of multiple migration routes shaping the peopling of the Americas. But what does this mean for the broader understanding of indigenous history and identity? How do we reconcile this new evidence with the narratives of colonization and dispossession that have defined the historical discourse? And what implications does it have for the ongoing struggles for indigenous rights and recognition? Moreover, as we reflect on the assertion made in a previous video that Native Americans may not have been the original inhabitants of the land, we are compelled to confront uncomfortable truths and reckon with the legacies of colonialism and injustice. Could it be that indigenous peoples have been marginalized and their histories erased by dominant narratives that serve to justify conquest and exploitation? Now, as I leave you with these lingering questions, I invite you to join me in the continued exploration of the complexities of human history and the stories that shape our understanding of the world. Let us remain curious, open-minded, and committed to uncovering the truths that lie beneath the surface of conventional wisdom. So feel free to share your thoughts on what you think about this video. Thank you for watching and see you in my next video.